You live in a group of roughly 20 to 50 people. Same 20 to 50 people. Always. Not a rotating cast. Not new faces every week. Not a city of strangers you can disappear into. The same specific humans every single day, from the day you were born until the day you died. You know what everyone sounds like when they sleep. You know who gets irritable when they're hungry. You know who is generous and who quietly takes more than their share when they think no one is watching. There are maybe 4 or 5 people in your entire world who are the right age, unrelated to you and available. That is not a dating pool. That is a puddle. A very small puddle. In a landscape full of things that want to eat you, with very high stakes attached to every decision you make about who you spend your life standing next to. And the person you choose is not a lifestyle preference. It is a survival decision. Maybe the most consequential one you will ever make. Because in a world with no medicine, no stored food, no social safety net of any kind, the person standing next to you when things go wrong is either a resource or a liability. And evolution, that cold, patient, completely indifferent accountant running calculations across millions of years, was keeping very careful track of which was which. Now, what were they actually looking for? Physical health mattered, but not in the gym body, symmetrical jawline, currently trending beauty standard way. In the is this person actually going to survive way. Here's what's happening when you find someone physically attractive. Your brain is running a medical evaluation. Not consciously. You are not sitting there with a clipboard, but the hardware is doing it anyway. Clear skin means no active parasitic infection. No untreated wound going septic. Good. Symmetrical features mean stable genetic expression during development. The DNA replicated cleanly. Good. Bright eyes, fluid movement, energy. That is not charisma. That is the observable absence of illness. Good. You think you're noticing that someone is good looking. You are actually noticing that their immune system appears functional. Your ancestors have never once cared about your feelings about this. But here's the thing that almost never comes up when people talk about prehistoric attraction. Physical appearance was the least useful information available, because everyone already knew what everyone looked like. You'd been looking at the same 30 faces your entire life. That wasn't information. That was wallpaper. What was actually scarce, actually valuable, actually hard to fake, was character. What does this person do when they don't have to do anything? Do they share food when food is scarce, or do they find reasons not to? Do they help when someone is injured, or do they become very busy with something else? Do they stay calm when things go wrong, or do they become another problem you have to manage on top of the original problem? In a group of 30 people, these questions have answers. Specific, observable, already documented by everyone answers. There was no first date where you could perform a carefully curated version of yourself and hope they don't find out the rest until they're already emotionally invested. Your reputation was your dating profile, except it was written by everyone else, and it was completely accurate. There is a specific behavior that shows up across hunter-gatherer societies on every continent and that consistently correlates with being chosen as a partner. Generosity, not wealth. Not accumulation, the act of giving things away. Christopher Boehm, an anthropologist at the University of Southern California, spent decades studying what he calls the reverse dominance hierarchy in hunter-gatherer bands. The individuals with the highest social status, the most allies, the most reproductive success, were almost never the physically dominant males. They were the generous ones, the ones who killed something large and then made sure everyone ate before they did. What generosity signals in a survival environment is something extraordinarily powerful. It says, I am so competent at acquiring resources that I can afford to give them away. It says, if you attach your survival to mine, your children will eat. The selfish hunter, the one who kept the best cuts, who ate before sharing, he was not powerful. He was unattractive in the most fundamental biological sense, because everyone watching him was updating their assessment of what he would do when things got genuinely hard. And the answer they kept arriving at was not someone you want raising your children. Now, the question underneath all of this, did they fall in love? Helen Fisher, a biological anthropologist at Rutgers University, spent years scanning the brains of people in the early stages of romantic love using fMRI technology. What she found was that romantic love activates the ventral tegmental area, one of the oldest structures in the human brain. Not old as in ancient civilizations old as in predates the development of the prefrontal cortex old as in shared with species that diverged from our lineage millions of years ago. This structure was not built for dating apps or candlelit dinners or the particular emotional experience of someone finally texting back after 3 days of silence. It was built for survival-critical bonding between individuals in high-risk environments. The same system that makes you unable to sleep and unable to eat and unable to stop thinking about one specific person. That system was active in the brain of a Homo sapiens sitting by a fire 80,000 years ago, staring at someone across the flames, feeling something they had no words for. Same chemicals, same neural pathways, same absolutely irrational intensity. The fire was different, the feeling was not. But if love existed, something else existed too, and it's uglier. Jealousy. David Buss, an evolutionary psychologist at the University of Texas, has documented jealousy in every human culture ever systematically studied. Not most cultures, every culture. The emotional response to perceived romantic threat appears to be genuinely universal, and in a band of 30 people where you have chosen one of 4 or 5 available partners, and that partner is literally always visible to you, jealousy was not an abstract emotional experience you processed in therapy. If your partner left, you didn't just lose a relationship. You lost your co-parent, your hunting partner, the person who watched the fire while you slept, your primary survival support in an environment that offered essentially no redundancy. That is not heartbreak in the modern sense. That is a life-threatening resource loss. But violence in a small group is catastrophic. Injure a rival and you've reduced your group's survival capacity, created permanent enemies among their relatives who are also your group mates, and marked yourself as unstable. So the jealousy had to be managed, redirected through social pressure, gossip, reputation damage, alliance building, making yourself more valuable. The same tools you will recognize immediately from every workplace and every group of friends navigating a complicated romantic situation. Same system, different setting. Let's talk about what women were actually evaluating. Because the standard story is simple and wrong. Ancient men had all the agency, ancient women had none. Kim Hill, an anthropologist who spent decades studying the ache hunter-gatherers of Paraguay, observed that ache women exercised significant choice in partner selection. They left relationships that weren't working. They chose new partners. They had preferences and acted on them. Here's why. There was no property, no land to inherit, no economic system that made a woman's survival contingent on male approval. Those systems came later with agriculture. Before that, in mobile foraging bands, a woman's labour was not optional. In most documented foraging societies, gathered plant foods, predominantly collected by women, constitute between 50 and 80% of total caloric intake. If you are providing the majority of the group's daily calories, you are not powerless. What women appear to have been selecting for, with some consistency, is investment. Not the biggest male in the group. The one most likely to still be there. The one whose pattern of behaviour, observable over years, suggested sustained commitment. Who shared food reliably. Who engaged with children. Who showed up when showing up was costly. Because in a world where pregnancy made you vulnerable for 9 months, and a human infant required years of intensive care, choosing someone who would disappear when the investment got difficult was not a romantic disappointment. It was potentially a death sentence. There is an archaeological site in what is now the Czech Republic called Dawn Vestonis. It dates to approximately 26,000 years ago. Buried there in a triple grave are 3 individuals, 2 males and 1 female, arranged in a specific deliberate configuration. The female in the centre. Both males with hands reaching toward her. We don't know what this means. We genuinely don't. But what it tells us is that 26,000 years ago, humans were thinking about relationships in ways complex enough to require symbolic expression in death, that whoever buried them felt these bonds were worth preserving even after the individuals were gone. That is not the behaviour of creatures who chose partners randomly. That is the behaviour of people for whom love, or something indistinguishable from it, mattered. Here is the thing that nobody fully reckons with. Ancient mate selection was, in one specific way, more honest than anything we have built since. You cannot fake generosity in front of 30 people who watch you eat every meal. You cannot perform reliability to someone who has watched you respond to actual emergencies your entire life. You cannot construct a carefully curated version of yourself, because who you actually are is the only version of you that exists in a group with no walls, no private spaces, no ability to disappear and reconstruct yourself with strangers who don't know the previous version. What you were was what everyone already knew. Your reputation was written by every person who had ever observed you, and there was no appeals process. And in some strange, uncomfortable, slightly melancholy way, that might have been better. Not easier. Not more romantic. Just more real. So how did ancient humans choose their partners? They watched people live. Not perform. Not present. Live, actually, really, unguardedly live, in front of witnesses, under real conditions, with real stakes. They looked for health, because health meant survival. They looked for generosity, because generosity meant their children would eat. They looked for reliability, because reliability meant someone would still be there when the world did not cooperate. They felt things they couldn't name, and followed those feelings because those feelings were millions of years of survival intelligence expressing itself through chemistry in a brain that had no other language for what it was trying to say. And here you are, at the end of that chain, still running the same software, still looking at people across rooms and feeling things you didn't decide to feel and can't fully explain, and definitely cannot turn off no matter how inconvenient the timing. Still asking the same question those people were asking 100,000 years ago around fires in the dark. Is this someone I can trust with my future? You haven't answered it any better than they did. You've just got more apps to avoid answering it with,